The room went quiet the moment he said it. Not silent the way a room gets when something beautiful happens, but the kind of quiet that follows something you can't take back. His hand swept toward me across the cocktail table, a casual introduction, and he said, "And this is our lead developer. She basically built the whole back end." He laughed. The men around him laughed. We wouldn't have a product without her. Not co-founder, not partner, not the person who stayed up for 63 consecutive hours during our seed round to rebuild the entire infrastructure after our first architecture collapsed. Lead developer. I extended my hand to the man across from me, the one who would be signing our acquisition papers in 48 hours, and I smiled the way I had learned to smile in rooms where I was always slightly less than what I actually was. His name was Richard Calloway. He ran a mid-sized enterprise software firm out of Charlotte, and his handshake was the kind that told you he had been practicing it since business school. "Impressive work," he said to me. Then he turned back to my co-founder and said, "You built a hell of a team." My co-founder nodded with the ease of a man receiving something he had always expected to receive. I was 29 years old. I had started this company with my own savings, my own code, and a whiteboard in my apartment before my co-founder had ever heard of the problem we were solving. 6 years, 83 employees. An acquisition offer worth more money than either of our families had ever seen in one place. And I was standing inside a room I had helped pay for, wearing a name tag that read my first name only, being introduced as a technician. I didn't correct him. Not in that moment, not in that room. But something shifted in the back of my mind, quiet and very certain, the way a door doesn't slam but simply clicks shut with precision. I need to back up. My co-founder and I had met at a product conference in Austin 6 years earlier. He was charming in the specific way that rooms full of investors reward. He spoke in frameworks. He made analogies that landed. He had the kind of face that appeared trustworthy in photographs, which, in the world we operated in, was worth more than most people admitted. I was there to talk to a data infrastructure team about a problem I had been building a solution for on my own for nearly a year. A logistics coordination gap in mid-sized distribution companies, a space nobody had thought to make elegant. I had the architecture. I had the prototype. I had no idea how to fill a room with people who would write checks. He had that. He did not have the architecture. So we agreed to build it together. I remember the exact afternoon we signed the partnership agreement. It was a Tuesday, November, the heat still lingering in Texas in a way that felt unearned. We sat across from each other at a coffee shop with a contract a lawyer friend had drafted cheaply as a favor. He was already talking about the pitch deck, the market size slide, the type of VC firms we should approach first. He spoke fast in that way he always did when something excited him, words tumbling forward, always pointing at the horizon. I slid a single page across the table before he could finish. He looked at it. "What's this?" "An IP assignment addendum," I said. "It clarifies that the core architecture and all derivative technology remain co-owned with joint approval required for licensing or transfer." He glanced at his coffee, then back at the page. "That seems overly complicated for where we are right now. It's one paragraph," I said. He picked up the pen and signed it the way people sign things when they are focused on something else. He was already thinking about the pitch deck. He was already seeing the outcome. The fine print was something he had always treated as a formality, a speed bump between him and the thing he actually wanted. I folded the page and put it in my bag. That addendum became the spine of everything that followed. The first 3 years were honest, in the way that hard things often are. We worked in a converted garage in San Diego, then a shared office, then real space with real desks, and a kitchen that smelled like recycled air conditioning. I built the product. He built the relationships. There was a logic to it, and for a long time the logic held. But somewhere in the middle of year 4, the logic started to tip. The first time I noticed it was at a demo event in San Francisco. We had been invited to present at a mid-sized industry conference, the kind with a real stage and a real audience of decision-makers. I had spent 3 weeks preparing the technical demonstration. I had built a live integration that had never been shown publicly. I had scripted the flow. He walked onto that stage and presented every piece of it as though he had conceived it that morning. He used the word "I" 42 times. I counted. Not because I was looking for ammunition, but because somewhere around the 15th time I started paying attention. I was seated in the third row. When a woman from the audience approached me afterward and said she had loved the demo and asked if I worked for the company, I told her I co-founded it. She blinked. "Oh," she said. "He didn't mention that." He rarely did. By year 5, I had stopped waiting to be mentioned. I had started doing something quieter instead. I documented. I organized. I preserved. Not because I believed it would matter, not because I was planning anything, but because I had grown up watching my mother keep every receipt in a shoebox under the bed, not out of suspicion but out of habit, out of the understanding that the people who remember the details are the ones who survive, the ones who don't. I kept the shoebox. The acquisition conversation started in January. Richard Calloway's firm had been circling us for 2 quarters. The offer, when it formally arrived, was the kind of number that makes very calm people briefly lose their composure. My co-founder called me from a parking garage to tell me, his voice doing something I had never heard it do before, a crack in the frame, just for a second, before the performance settled back into place. "This is it," he said. "Yes," I said. "We need to move fast. His team wants to close by end of quarter." "I know," I said. "Send me the acquisition documents when they're ready." He sent them on a Thursday. I read every page. I read every page the way I always read things, slowly, beginning to end, without skipping. And somewhere in the middle of the asset transfer schedule I found it. The listing of intellectual property to be transferred to Callaway Enterprises LLC at close of transaction. My name was not on the listed owners, his name was. I set the document down on my kitchen counter. Outside, San Diego was doing what it always does in spring, warm without effort, the kind of weather that makes it easy to forget anything is wrong. I did not call him. I did not send an email. I poured a glass of water and stood at the window for 4 minutes, thinking about the addendum I had placed in his hands 6 years earlier on a warm Tuesday in Austin, thinking about the IP registration I had filed 18 months after that, the one that formally recorded joint ownership with joint approval rights required for any third-party transfer, thinking about the fact that he had sent me acquisition documents for my own company that listed him as sole IP owner. Then I thought about the launch party. 3 weeks away. The official announcement of the acquisition, a catered event at a venue downtown, investors and partners and press, and the Callaway team, everyone dressed for celebration. I thought about what would happen if I waited until then. I put the glass down and went back to my desk. I did not send back the signed documents. I simply said I needed time to review. He took that as expected, the technical person being careful, thorough, appropriately slow. He did not read into it because he had never, in 6 years, believed I was capable of anything that required reading into. That was his oldest and most reliable mistake. The night of the launch party, I arrived early. The venue was a renovated warehouse near the waterfront, the kind of space that is always available for exactly this type of event. Exposed beams, soft industrial lighting, catering staff in black moving through the crowd with practiced invisibility. The branding team had done their work. Our company logo, the one I had sketched on a napkin and paid a designer $400 to formalize, appeared on banners and screens throughout the space. I found the program booklet on the welcome table near the entrance. Thick paper, matte finish, the kind of print job that signals money and confidence. I opened it to the inside cover. There was a full-page profile of my co-founder, his photograph, his biography, his vision, his quote about what building this company had meant to him. I flipped through the rest of the booklet, press mentions, timeline of milestones, product highlights. My name appeared twice, once in the technical credits section on the last page, once in a list of team members beneath a group photo, not co-founder, not partner, not anywhere near the front. I closed the booklet and set it back on the table exactly as I had found it. A member of the events team appeared beside me, clipboard in hand, expression polite and distracted. "Are you on the press list?" she asked, already moving her pen toward a different column. I told her my name. She looked at the list, then looked at me. "I have you as general attendee." "Not founder, not executive, general attendee." "That's fine," I said. I found my seat. It was at a table near the side of the room, a table of external vendors and plus ones, people who were connected to the celebration without being central to it. My co-founder's table was front and center, visible from every angle of the room, his seat already marked with a small card. He found me 20 minutes before the formal program began. He was in a navy blazer, relaxed, the particular version of relaxed that people perform when they want you to know how comfortable they are. He put a hand briefly on my shoulder. "Hey," he said, "glad you made it. Big night." "It is," I said. "Listen." He lowered his voice slightly. The way people do when they are about to say something they know requires a softer volume. After the formal remarks, Callaway's team wants to do a private sit-down with the core acquisition leadership. Just the business side. I think it would actually be better if you slipped out after the toast. You know how these conversations go. Technical detail slows the room down. I looked at him. "It's not personal," he said, and I believed him, which was almost worse. "You're brilliant at what you do. This is just a different kind of room." He squeezed my shoulder once and moved toward the front of the space. I sat with that for a moment. The specificity of it. Not angry, not loud, not even particularly malicious. Just a quiet instruction to disappear. I thought about my co-founder's signature at the bottom of that Austin addendum. About his name, alone, at the top of an IP transfer document he had sent me to sign. Then I thought about the unsigned acquisition agreement still sitting in my inbox. I picked up my bag, set my name card upright on the table so it was readable, and walked toward the exit with my steps even and unhurried. I did not look back at the stage. I did not look back at the banner with the logo I had designed. I pushed through the glass door and stepped into the waterfront air, and the sound of the party sealed itself off behind me like a room that had already moved on. My car was parked 4 blocks north. I drove home with the radio off. In my apartment, I didn't change clothes. I sat at my desk in the dress I had worn to be celebrated in, opened my laptop, and started working. The acquisition agreement was still in my inbox. I opened it, went to the asset transfer schedule, and began building the response I had been thinking about for 3 weeks without letting myself fully think about it. First, I called my attorney. It was late, but she answered because she always answered, and because I had sent her the addendum and the IP registration 6 months earlier without explanation, just asking her to hold on to them and know where they were. She understood the shape of things quickly. "The transfer as written is invalid," she said. "Joint ownership with joint approval rights means you have to sign for any IP transfer to proceed. Without your signature, the acquisition cannot legally close." "I know," I said. "What do you want to do?" "I want to renegotiate the terms," I said, "starting with how I'm listed." She was quiet for a moment, the particular kind of quiet that precedes precise action. "Send me everything by midnight," she said. "I'll have the counter-proposal ready by 6 a.m. I sent everything by 11. Then I opened a second window and pulled up the board communication portal. Our company had a small advisory board, 3 individuals who had been present since our Series A, who knew the financials and the roadmap and exactly how we had arrived at this acquisition offer. I composed a brief, factual message. I attached the original partnership agreement, the IP addendum, the IP registration, and the relevant sections of the acquisition document. I noted the discrepancy between the listed IP ownership and the registered legal ownership. I noted that I had not signed the acquisition agreement. I didn't editorialize. I didn't explain how I felt. I just sent the documents. Then I opened the acquisition document one more time and scrolled to the co-founder designation section. The one that listed him, alone, as founding executive. I highlighted the section and made a note in the margin: factual, clean, no excess. By 2 a.m., I had sent everything that needed to be sent. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence of the apartment settle. I thought about the first night I had worked in this apartment on the original prototype, the same desk, a different version of the same quiet. The way I had felt building something from nothing, the specific satisfaction of structure emerging from a problem, not the reward of it but the act of it. That was still mine. That part nothing had touched. I closed the laptop halfway and listened to the city settle into its late-night rhythm. Not celebrating, not grieving, just holding the shape of what I had done, the way a held breath holds itself before it releases. I closed the laptop the rest of the way. The sound of it was small and final, like a period at the end of a sentence that had taken 6 years to write. The next morning, my attorney had the counter-proposal ready at 5:58 a.m. By 7:15 a.m., 2 of the 3 advisory board members had responded to my communication. Both had questions. Both wanted to speak that afternoon. The third responded by 9 a.m. His message was 4 sentences. The last sentence said, "I have flagged this for Richard Calloway's legal team directly." My co-founder called me at 9:43 a.m. I let it ring. He called again at 9:51, then sent a text, then called from a different number, which told me he had already started to understand the shape of what he was looking at. I let them all pass. At 2 p.m., I walked into the conference room at our attorney's office. The table seated 12. Richard Calloway was there with 2 members of his legal team. My co-founder was there, in the same navy blazer from the night before, his expression arranged into something between professional and strained. Our 3 advisory board members dialed in on a screen at the far end of the table. My attorney sat beside me. My co-founder spoke first. "I think there's been a miscommunication about the documentation." "There hasn't," my attorney said. She didn't look up from her binder. She walked the room through it in sequence. The original partnership agreement, the IP addendum, the registration, the acquisition document as submitted, the discrepancy, the legal consequence. Her voice was neutral, measured, the voice of someone who has made this kind of argument before and has no interest in making it dramatic. Richard Calloway's lead attorney asked 3 technical questions. My attorney answered all 3 without pausing. When she finished, the room was the kind of quiet I had started to recognize, not the quiet of something ending, but the quiet of something being understood for the first time by people who had not understood it before. My co-founder looked at me. "Calloway can't close without your signature." "No," I said. "You're willing to block this." I looked at him for a moment without speaking. Not to make him wait, not for effect, but because I wanted to be precise. "I'm willing to sign," I said, "on corrected terms." I opened my copy of the revised counter-proposal and set it on the table. The corrected terms were not punitive. They did not take anything that wasn't already mine. They simply asked that the acquisition documents accurately reflect what had always been true, that the company had 2 co-founders, that the IP was jointly owned, that the transition structure acknowledged both. Richard Calloway's attorney read through the counter-proposal. He made 2 margin notes. He leaned over and spoke quietly to Calloway himself. Calloway looked up at me across the table. "You built the core product," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. He nodded once, the nod of a man who reads things before he signs them. Then he looked at his attorney and said, "Fix the documents." My co-founder didn't say anything for a long time. He looked at the counter-proposal. He looked at the table. He looked at the board members on the screen, searching for something. An exit, a reframe, an angle he hadn't tried yet. None of them offered one. Finally, he looked at me. His expression had traveled through several versions of itself and had arrived somewhere quieter, stripped of the performance I had watched him put on for 6 years in rooms full of people who never noticed it was a performance. "When did you plan this?" he said. "I thought about the addendum on that Tuesday in Austin, about my mother's shoebox, about all the ways I had been paying attention without letting him know I was paying attention. I didn't plan it," I said. "I just paid attention." He picked up his pen and signed the counter-proposal. 2 weeks later, the acquisition closed. The announcement press release listed 2 co-founders. My name appeared first in the IP ownership section because alphabetically it came first and no one had bothered to rearrange it. No one needed to. The Calloway integration was clean, cleaner than anyone expected, partly because I had built the architecture to be modular from the beginning, designed for exactly this kind of handoff, though at the time I had told myself I was doing it for scalability. Maybe both were true. My co-founder and I spoke twice in the months that followed. Brief and professional. He was transitioning out. The terms of the agreement had given him that option, and he took it the way he took most things, with forward momentum and the careful construction of a story in which everything had happened exactly as he intended. I didn't follow it. I had other things to read. The new office was on the 3rd floor of the Calloway campus, windows facing west, the afternoon light coming in at an angle that made the room look warmer than it was. I kept the desk sparse. 1 notebook, 1 mug, the same laptop. On the wall behind the door, framed in brushed aluminum, the original partnership agreement from that coffee shop in Austin, not out of sentiment, out of clarity. Because some documents deserve to be visible, to serve as a reminder that the structures we build at the beginning are the ones we live inside at the end. My name and co-founder title appeared on the company registration, the acquisition filing, the press release, the internal org chart, and the small bronze plate on my office door. I ran my finger across it the first morning, once. Then I pushed the door open and went to work. Months after the signing, I got a text from one of the advisory board members. He said something I had heard in different forms before, that he had always known I was more than what was visible, that he was glad it had finally been made clear. I thanked him and put the phone down. The truth was simpler and less flattering than that. He hadn't always known. Nobody had. The visibility had always depended on me creating conditions in which it could not be denied, and that was neither graceful nor particularly fair. It was just true. The work was mine from the beginning. The documentation was mine from that Tuesday in Texas. The signature I withheld was mine because the company was partly mine, had always been, regardless of who stood at the microphone. Some people build for applause. They need the room to confirm what they've done. They position themselves for the photograph. They count the times their name is mentioned. They measure the size of their portion of the credit and feel it diminish when it's shared. I had spent 6 years in a company I co-built being invisible in exactly the proportion that my co-founder needed me to be, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped trying to be seen and started building something better instead. The thing nobody tells you about being underestimated is this. It requires a kind of patience that most people mistake for passivity. It is not passivity, it is preparation. It is the shoebox under the bed. It is the addendum slid across the table during the replay. It is the IP registration filed on a quiet afternoon when no one was watching and no one thought it mattered. It is knowing that the people who rush past the fine print are not careful people, and careful people, in the end, inherit the documents. If you've ever built something and watched someone else take a bow for it, stay close. We tell stories like this one, the ones that get buried and then surface, the ones that prove it quietly, in the places that can't be edited or reframed or spun. Silence is not weakness, it is architecture. And some structures take years to reveal their full design.